Biodiversity Building, UNFAO, and we have Dr. D. Ramanathan, who is the General Secretary of Ayurvedic Medicine Manufacturers Organization of India. So I will make a small presentation. Hopefully it would be small, because I have stopped everyone from making one. Thank you, Sukanya. So why are we talking about biodiversity? Because India is a mega biodiverse region. It has 3 of the 34 globally identified biodiversity zones. Sorry? 4 is what I know. At least on the NVS side, it's 4. 4 I have from authority. We have nearly 7 to 8% of the recorded species of the world. And it's one of the 8 Wavlovian centers of origin. And I know it was 18 by Dr. Mathur. So Dr. Pandey, if you could also resolve that issue. Is it 8 or 18? And all these, we are a Wavlovian center of origin. So we have diversity of crop plants and have more than 300 wild ancestors and close relatives of cultivated plants. And most importantly, we have traditional knowledge that is associated with this biodiversity. We use it as medicines and we use it as food. So Dr. Mathur did talk about this earlier in the morning, but I will just briefly run through this next couple of slides. So we became party to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity in 1992. It has 3 main principles: conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use. Just a minute. Yeah, it's not coming. Yeah, got it. And fair and equitable sharing of benefit arising from use of genetic resources. So as we know, we signed the Nagoya Protocol in 2010, and at this moment we are working towards a global framework for managing nature through 2030. The work on this is still going on. So what is important is India is signatory to all of these. We signed CBD in 1994. We had our Biodiversity Act in 2002. And at this moment, the latest that we have done is we issued guidelines on access to biological resources and associated knowledge and equitable sharing of benefits regulation in 2019. So what is there in the Biological Diversity Act, which is being amended now? It mandates prior approval for accessing biological resources, associated knowledge for research and commercial utilization. It has specific regulation for access by foreign and Indian entities. Breaking these rules is open to criminal charges. That means you can be, if you are a commercial enterprise, you will there would be a non-bailable warrant for you, and it is punishable by imprisonment and arrest without a warrant. NBA has the right to levy benefit sharing fee or royalty or impose certain conditions on the distribution of the rights for commercial purposes. So what is ABS? That is access and benefit sharing. What is important here is so far that there is no good ABS model despite 2 decades of legislation. We had a case earlier that is pre-CBD, which is called the Arogya Pacha case. In 1987, a team of researchers from Regional Research Laboratory Jammu visited the Agastya Hills in Kerala to collect data. Their guides, who were from the Kani tribe, told the scientists about a plant that they used to remain energetic. This plant was Trichoplus zelanica. The scientists used this knowledge to prepare a drug called Jeevni in 1995, and this technology was transferred to a company, an Ayurvedic manufacturer, who paid royalty till 2008. But however, though it was highlighted as a very successful and sustainable model, it could benefit only a few of the community members. And the manufacturers faced problems with access to the raw material, as this was not a minor forest produce. So the forest department never let these go out of the forest for the industry. And this is not codified knowledge within the text of Ayurveda also. So that was also a problem, that it could not be accessed from the forest. Post CBD, we have a case of cultivation of seaweed in Tamil Nadu, where a company called Equa Agri Processing Private Limited paid NBA royalty for collecting the seaweed from the state. The seaweed is an invasive species. There's no traditional knowledge in this. And from I asked Dr. Mathu, the royalty has been now used up. So this is changed. The last line has changed. But there has been a lot of problems with the act itself. There have been more problems. So there have been two cases that I would like to highlight. The first case was filed in 2016 in NGT that showed non-compliance to the NBA. So Chandrabhal Singh filed a case and asked that the biodiversity management committees and the people's biodiversity registers should be maintained as required by NBA. So NGT directed the government to ensure 100% compliance by end of January 2020. By March 2020, the rate of effective compliance implementation was at 90%. However, in case of people's biodiversity register, 61% of the BMCs are yet to make the PBRs. This case was disposed of in 2020, saying that the government has done something to meet the criteria. The next case was filed in the Uttarakhand High Court, which showed a very big loophole in the MBA. So in 2016, Divya Pharmacy filed a case saying that the State Biodiversity Board did not have the authority to impose a fair and equitable benefit sharing on the Indian entities using biological resources. So the reason was that permission had to be taken only from the National Biodiversity Board, and the State Biodiversity Board just had to be informed, and as they just had to be informed, they did not have to be given did not have to share benefits. In December 2018, the Uttarakhand High Court held that all Indian companies which extracted biological resources have to take prior approval and also share part of their revenue with the local communities. However, the court did acknowledge that there was a big gray area in the NBA. So after that, we have the Biological Diversity Amendment Bill that was tabled in the Parliament in 2021, introduced in the Parliament in 2021. So this had a few purposes: to reduce burden of wild medicinal plants and encourage their cultivation, facilitate environment for collaborative research and investments, improve research patent application process, reduce need of practitioners and companies making medicinal products for taking permission from NBA, increasing the composition of NBA, and revising positions and responsibilities in the authority. The main thing that it did was it decriminalized violations. So the non-bailable warrant that was earlier could be used, it's not going to be used now. It suggested a creation of two separate authorities, the Biodiversity Authority at a center and at the state level, and withdraws the power given to the National Biodiversity Authority to file an FIR against the defaulting party for violation, provides for creation of inquiry officer who, following an inquiry, can impose a penalty of up to 1 crore in case of continuous violations. So this Biodiversity Amendment Bill 2021 was referred to a joint parliamentary committee on December 2021. Work is still going on. Dr. Mathu said they are meeting every day, and it would be soon that we would get this, a decision on this would be taken. But there are a lot of concerns that have arisen due to this amendment bill. I have around 10 on my slides, but there are many, many more. I'm just taken some of them, cherry picked them, which were easier to write. So it prioritizes trade over conservation. It prioritizes intellectual property and commercial, just a minute, I don't remember this word. trade at the expense of conserving biodiversity. It allows Ayush practitioners and manufacturers to access biological resources without obtaining prior approval from the State Biodiversity Board. It distinguishes between Indian and foreign nationals for accessing the biodiversity, but the experts say that both have equal impact. So why are you distinguishing between them? They fear that it would lead to biopiracy because it would help people file patents without having to obtain prior approval from NBA. It marginalizes communities. It allows the state boards to represent biodiversity management committees while taking decision on the use of the resources. It promotes the use of cultivated medicinal plant over the plant collected from the wild, but there's no way in which you can distinguish between the two. So you don't know how they are going to do this. So this has to be worked out. Other than that, they are not very happy about the fact that the consultations have been held with only industry representatives before tabling the amendments in the parliament. They feel that the amendments seem to have emerged mainly from the demands of the medicine, seed, and other bio-based industries. This bill has been, after a lot of noise was made about it, the bill ended up for examination by the joint committee when it should have actually gone to the standing committee on environment and forests, science and technology. It is not clear where the legally empowered biodiversity management committees were in all these processes and why they have not been asked, because it's a community-based effort. They should have been part of this. They also say that instead of drawing from the Convention of Biological Diversity, it only talks about access and benefit sharing as if it's a resource. They also say it's a resource, and they are not saying it's a biodiversity thing. So they are not also talking about agrobiodiversity in the whole bill. So the farming communities that have been custodians of the folk varieties, they are being kept out of this, and they might not get the fair and equitable benefit from the sharing their produce. So that is the end of my slide. Thank you. And how do I unshare? Okay, so I will ask now questions. And the first question that I would ask is Dr. Pandey. So as I said earlier, does he need a mic? No?
Mic.
Okay, so as we talked about, the access and benefit sharing has not.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Go ahead.
So access and benefit sharing mechanisms have not been working very well. So do you see these amendments making any difference into the whole thing? And what needs to be done to actually ensure that the amendments help the communities?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. Let's talk good things first. This 2002 Act, Biodiversity Act of India. In 2014, the Nagoya Protocol came. India's Nagoya Protocol was in 2002 itself. Biodiversity itself is a new term which came into the world in 1980, during 80s. When I was in college, we never used the word biodiversity. And I don't know how many of us here know biodiversity. What is biodiversity, right? It's like, what is potato? Is it a root? Is it a stem? So we leave it there. It's aloo hai, potato. Biodiversity, that's the end. Biodiversity. What does it mean? And I can see from the leaflet here, it's on the third day you are discussing biodiversity. Yeah, though this is a wildlife day. Yes, very World Wildlife Day, and we are really in a very sorry state of affairs there also. But anyway, the point is, nature protects if she is protected. Today, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change logo is what? Nature protects if she is protected. Fortunately, I was there during that time. I have served in Environment Ministry for 8 years and handled the subject of biodiversity for so many years. So what I would say, this landmark act, Biodiversity Act of 2002, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. Over the years, it's been 20 years. there will be changes taking place. It's a regulatory act, and all of us run away from regulation. Regulation should not be for me, it's for you. That should not be the state of affairs. There were some gray areas. I happen to be the chairperson of this authority in my additional capacity. That was another bane, having an act in 2002, then rules in 2004, and mind you, guidelines in 2014. So 12 years of the act, there was no step, how to implement it, right? So 2014, you are truly being there and as a kind of member of the Indian Administrative Service, not invasive alien species, not IAS that way. I ensured, whatever came to my table as a civil servant throughout my career, I ensured that it goes to the logical end. And that is where the 2014 guidelines came. Before that also, I think our Ayush friend is here, and industry people used to come to us. We all run away, human nature, run away from regulations. It's not only Biodiversity Act, it's all acts. See, India's legal and policy framework is one of the best, but it's only for the paper. So we are paper tigers in legal and policy framework. We don't want to implement. Unfortunately, in 20 years, we have not implemented what was there in 2002. And lo and behold, we have come with an amendment. And there are some, I will, as we go along, because I would love, because there's a session, afternoon session, it's better question and answer. So to answer your question, there was nothing wrong with the 2002 Act. There are some gray areas, which all along government will try and address, right? And there are in the present amendment which have been proposed, there are some areas which, if implemented, if accepted, I think it's better to close the 2002 Act. I would end here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pandey. So I would now ask one question from Shalini. So as a lawyer, you have seen many acts, legislations and amendments. What are the provisions in this amendment bill that are of concern? What would you like to say?
Right. Thank you, Vibha. And I'd like to start by my appreciation to the organizers and my greetings to the fellow panelists, Dr. Pandey, Dr. Ramanathan. My concerns are in terms of both process as well as the content and the political context in which this bill has to be placed. The process, in part, has been corrected by the Joint Parliamentary Committee opening it up to receive comments from all the stakeholders. But otherwise, in the last 2 years, particularly during the pandemic period, the processes of consultations were ongoing with industry, and therefore there was a very limited public consultation at that stage. And so as a law and policy researcher, one would argue that these processes of consultation are institutionalized even in the pre-legislative state. My second is not only particular provisions, but to recognize that it's even since its inception in 2002, even though India has been one of the important flag bearers of not only the Convention on Biological Diversity, but many of its protocols and sub-treaties that have emerged from it, and amongst the first countries to even have a full-fledged legislation on this subject. But the priority has always been given to the commercial sector. And also the second is the concern around the impacts on non-centralized biodiversity governance, which is what our constitutional amendments, the 73rd and the 74th amendments also do. So there was a lot of promise and hope with the 2002 biodiversity management committees that have been set up under the legislation to actually take those decision-making to that level. But the larger context is not only just the concerns of the erosion of biodiversity, and this is something that even the Food and Agriculture Organization made very clear in its 2019 report, which is the first of its kind on the state of biodiversity for food and agriculture, that there is a biodiversity crisis to the same extent and degree, and perhaps even worse, as many of your previous speakers have also said. It's more acute perhaps than even the climate crisis, and therefore that needs immediate remediation and attention. The other concern is the erosion of the very idea and the concept of access and benefit sharing, which brings me to the point that as a lawyer, since you addressed this question to me, what I learned in law school was that every law is about effecting justice. And the justice that we're talking about within the parameters of this discussion is biojustice, because bioprospecting was happening, because there was a hue and cry about biopiracy of both plant and animal and fish genetic resources. And there were concerns about biodiversity conservation. So it was hoped that not only the international treaty, but the domestic legislation that was designed to implement that international treaty will affect biojustice. And if you look at the last 20 years of the experience, the emphasis has been essentially on commercialization and on access, but on conservation and sustainable use. We're still learning from our everyday experiences and how industry has also responded to it and kind of steered the debate in a certain direction. So I think when we are confronted with these amendments, they should be seen from two filters. Do they address the gaps or address the problems that have emerged in the implementation in the real-time experience of the last 2 decades? And also, how do we prepare ourselves for the next 20 years? Because there are new technologies, whether it's new plant breeding technologies or the digital sequence information initiative, which is talking about dematerializing the whole discussion on access and benefit sharing. So the very fundamentals of access and benefit sharing frameworks, which meant that as and when physical material as well as the associated knowledge is accessed from local communities, that gives them the legal right to seek benefits and for them to be consulted before they are used in a manner outside of their context. And when they are used for commercial utilization, then some benefits, whether monetary or non-monetary, will ensue and be shared equitably and fairly. What is called FEBS, fair and equitable benefit sharing, will happen with the local communities through the BMCs. So these are questions that still remain. And I think the learning experience from the last 20 years ought to have been factored into these amendments. My bigger concern is that these amendments are not simply about India, because it's also about the kind of diplomacy and the kind of important position that India has taken vis-a-vis other related multilateral agreements, particularly the World Trade Organization. And you mentioned, Vibha, that we signed on to the CBD in 1992, 93. 92 was the Rio Conventions, and 1993 we signed on to that and became parties of the convention in 1994. But in 1995, we had also become the founding members of the World Trade Organization, which meant that we were confronted with an international regime which asked for the commercialization of both genetic material and traditional knowledge. And India was the country in 2006 which also proposed biodiversity amendments of the WTO TRIPS agreement. So the amendments now, they talk about simplification of the patent procedure and relaxation of some of the pre-grant procedures for intellectual property rights. My concern is that all the wins that have been made, not only for India, but as a country of the global south, as a mega diverse country, in trying to push back some of the provisions of the WTO TRIPS and extreme capitalism in that area, in the global arena, would also get a hit, which would mean that we would have to then roll back some of these very strong and hard-fought positions that we've taken even at the international level. So I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Shalini. So, Dr. Ramanathan, I would now like you to comment on the fact that we need biodiversity for the Ayush industry, for the medicines, and what kind of problems does the industry face in accessing biodiversity for the medicines? And what do you think that what are these problems which you think that the amendments will take care of?
Good afternoon, Chairman. First of all, thanks to Chairman. I raised one question. That is 2002, your first act. That is a definition. That definition area is there is no access, that no clause of the access. Then amendment bill, you are included access. One clause is certainly access. The access means collecting, procuring, or possessing any biological resource occurring in obtained from India or associated tradition knowledge. I repeated, associated tradition knowledge. Thereto, the purpose of the research and biodiversity for the commercial utilization. My humble request, sir, Ayurveda is a commercial utilization? No, this is health purpose, a health saving of the human being. Then what is the tradition knowledge, associated tradition knowledge? Associated tradition knowledge, that is, madam, you already mentioned that Arogya Pacha in Trivandrum, that is Ayurveda pharmacy, in 10, 20 years back, already started the APS. We are ready for that. For what purpose? That knowledge is a Kanis, that is tribal knowledge. This traditional knowledge is not for the human being. This is an Acharya, Panchabhuta Siddhanta, Tridosha Siddhanta, Jasa Virya Guna Viva Prabhavas. Then I come to the next area, the beneficial climate. That is, you are added, that is everything there, sir, you are added, that is research there, byproduct created whole days of associated tradition knowledge. You are added a word, beneficial area. Then again you are added one, excluding codified tradition knowledge for Indians. What is the logic, sir? Access you are included and beneficial area you are excluded. And my request, you define what is the tradition knowledge. Ayurveda, Panchabhuta Siddhantas, Acharya's concept is a traditional, our philosophy is a traditional knowledge. This is a shame for the India. Suppose you are giving the APS, I am not against for APS. We are already proved that. That is, we are already giving the tribals, you are already Arogya Pacha, we are already started now. My humble request, Ayurveda is not in a commercial utilization. This is for the health purpose. Why for you are going to the allopathy section? Most of the drugs, who is giving the knowledge? The knowledge from the old herbs. The herbs is come to the chemistry form. They are free from the ABS. Still, we are surveying for what purpose? For the Ayurveda health purpose. I am in a Vaidyan, sir. Suppose I am prescribing Ayurvedic medicine, no need of ABS. But same, I am preparing medicine as per the 1974 Act, Drugs and Cosmetics Act introduced in 1974. So after the Act, 25D license, sir, 25D license to whom? Only for Vaidyas. Without Vaidyas, no manufacturing. I am prescribing the medicine for Vaidyas for my patient, no ABS. I am preparing the medicine for the other hospital or other Vaidyas, need an ABS. What is the logic, sir? So first, my humble request, sir, Ayurveda is not in a commercial one. Second question, my request is a humble for the Ayurveda for the health purpose. And third one, I request to National Survey of the Organization, Calcutta. You go that report, that is only 10% of people's ice industries are using, ice system is using in India. 90, this is a report for the government of India, not my report. So we are not against for the ABS system. Our question is a traditional knowledge, codified knowledge, the Dress and Cosmetics Act, 58 books, they are mentioned only 680, more than you are mentioned that more than lakhs and lakhs of the species are there. How many only? 680 species only, the traditional 58 books, only 68 species. That species is excluded. Any new drugs included, we are ready for the ABS. Otherwise, I humble request, sir, you go there. It is collapse the Ayurveda system, not in industry. It is collapse the Ayurvedic system. You understand my point. We are not against ABS. If you are going to the traditional knowledge of the Ayurveda industry, the day by day is decreasing Ayurvedic system. All the day you come to the Kerala, you see what is the growth of the Ayurveda industry. Day by day, product-wise is degrowth. If you want proof, full paper I will send it. Only the growth is only in the price value. Product-wise is decreasing. What is identification? So you are asking that is a need. Yes, APS, we are National Medicine Plan Board, State Medicine Plan Board, cultivation is already started. We are already buyback arrangements, we are all started. Why you are taking the access and beneficial share? One side you are giving the permission, one side is excluded. I hope you are understand our views. We are not against for the ABS. ABS only the traditional knowledge or Acharya's knowledge, the schedule 1 book, 58 books, knowledge, we are preparing the medicine for the life saving, not for commercial purpose, not for commercial purpose. This is my humble suggestion, sir. Madam.
Thank you, Dr. Ramanathan. So I would now start taking questions. Who has questions? Oh my God.
I think she wanted to say something.
Who? Shalini, you want to say something?
Yes, please. I think, I'm listening to what is being talked about definitionally in terms of commercial utilization, as well as access definitions and traditional knowledge. These have been also contested internationally. I mean, there is a whole process under the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, to actually draft a traditional knowledge protection treaty. And so there are very clear definitions there on codified knowledge, and the Indian systems of medicine fall within the definition of organized formal knowledge systems and scientific and validated, etc., which have been on for eons, which very well qualify for what is considered as and defined as codified traditional knowledge. And there's a fair degree of protection already granted to codified traditional knowledge, whether it's through our TKDL, the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, to prevent the inappropriate grant of IPR or particularly patents on any of these Indian systems of medicine, because this is prior knowledge, particularly of the Indian subcontinent. And then you also have other provisions through, the Ministry of Ayush is being promoting the actual practitioners and the industry itself. The concern is of non-codified traditional knowledge, particularly, for instance, seed keepers, ethno-fisheries knowledge of livestock breeders, which so far have been quite diligently recorded in people's biodiversity registers. But we would have hoped that there would be legal protection, and amendments have come, that there would be equal protection given to these people's biodiversity registers, particularly now that they get digitized. Now, my question is that I don't think we should look at biodiversity as a subset of the forest and wildlife or the environment sector. Countries are designing their strategies for bioeconomy. For instance, in 2019, the government of Japan has drafted what is called a bioeconomy strategy 2019, because this is the bio era. And so all commercial enterprises, whether it's Ayush or the seed sector, or even the R&D, because there are very thin lines between R&D and then that R&D resulting in commercial products. So all your sectors are the bottom line is that they use bioresources. So it's not a question of creating carve-outs from the access and benefit sharing for particular sectors and subsectors, but designing for a country a bioeconomy strategy. And Japan, in fact, the bio industry, the Japan Biotech Association and Biotech Industries, JBA, actually came out with voluntary guidelines on how they will do ethical access and benefit sharing, because they are a user country. They want to access resources from other countries. And so they wanted to walk the talk, and even their bioeconomy strategy talks about building bio communities which attract the respect both from domestic and overseas people. So I think our industry, because of the kind of leadership that India is expected to show in certain areas, I think it would have been wonderful if we would have developed an ethical ABS strategy for Indian industry that would put us on a much stronger ground, morally and legally and ethically, to demand the same kind of ethical treatment when the accessor and user countries access India's genetic resources, biological resources, and traditional knowledge. So you can then really insist on reciprocal treatment. Now, Vibha, what has happened in the last 20 years that when we made our legislation, we were a provider country. Now our own industry in the last 20 years is also ambitious to gain access and to and tap the export market. Therefore, we are looking at India as a user country itself. For instance, when Dabur accesses material from Nepal, from the wild in Nepal, for instance, and therefore would not want onerous access and benefit sharing requirements. So we have to understand that India itself has gone through a change in the last 20 years, but there are other countries, for instance, like USA has come up with a national bioeconomy blueprint, or China has come up with science, technology, innovation policy for 2030. The European Union has an innovation for sustainable growth, a bioeconomy for Europe. The OECD has the bioeconomy to 2030. So where all of these issues, right across sectors, where biodiversity is being mainstreamed. And so you design and develop, particularly from the last 20 years of experience, how do we bridge the gap and bridge the divide between bio-rich countries with poverty-stricken communities and the technology-rich countries, which really dictate the debate on intellectual property rights and how they can extract rent, which is rent from products they develop from the use from the global south. So there's a whole range of issues. I think it's not, I don't think we should limit the discussion only to the concerns of the Ayush industry.
Thank you. Dr. Ramanathan, do you want to add?
Yeah. Madam, you are silent, the section 7. The section 7 Indian industry is an Ayurveda industry. You are connected to Dabur. Dabur is a section 3, no problem. We are the section 7. The section 7, what is the giving clear intimation to the state biodiversity concern. But the section 3, any collaboration for the foreign entity, we are ready. Suppose anybody is invested our company, we are ready. We are not against. We want to save the Ayurveda industry. We are not against for the APS system. We understand our own position. Madam mentioned that 4,500 species in the presentation. How many species are using for the Schedule 1 books? Only hardly 600. The 600 drugs only hardly you are exempted from the APS system. If there other species are there, Arogyapacha is there. New drugs, we are ready for that. Our humble request is the Acharya, our old Acharya, their own understand. I request, madam, you go to the Wikipedia. What is there mentioned? Ayurveda is a pseudoscience. There go to the Wikipedia. What is there mentioned? Ayurveda is a pseudoscience. What is the meaning? This is a conventional method.
Dr. Ramanathan,
method, yes, understand. My point is there. So my request. Yeah. ABS system, we are ready for that. For the new any tradition, any new knowledge, we are ready to pay. But
Okay,
one
thank-
humble request, this is not one area,
So let
this
me-
is not
let-
a commercial
You know who is
utilization.
So Dr.
That
Pandey,
is only.
is this
Thank you.
being,
So you
Is
know,
these being-
who is driving the amendment, right?
what? No, but is this
No,
being taken
See,
care
the
of in
House,
the?
the today's discussion, because there is no question answer kind of thing. Who is defending? I am not National Biodiversity Authority.
Mhm.
CSE is not National Biodiversity Authority. Why this confusion? What is this act about?
Mhm.
What is conservation? What is sustainable use? What is access and benefit sharing? Let's try and make these people understand
Mhm.
and see where are we. Where are we? Instead of what Dr. Ramanathan is saying, that's why I said the Act of 2002 should not have come at all, right? If it was not there, there was no issue.
Mhm.
Now it's there, and I really salute the authorities in 2002 to bring this act to ensure this is a law for access and benefit sharing. There are plenty of laws in our country for conservation, right? Now, problem is conservation is a talk shop. Sustainable use, everybody wants to use, but what is sustainable, nobody knows. Similarly, no, I'll come. Trying to contextualize the discussion so that we can hit the point. Nail. Then third, these are three pillars of Convention on Biological Diversity, at whose stance Act of 2002 came, and even now it's being told the amendments are coming, so that we are at par with Nagoya Protocol and Convention on Biological Diversity. We are in league with ITPG, FRA. I'm not going into those details. Agriculture, FAO was mentioning about all those things. The third, access and benefit sharing. Everybody wants access, but what about benefit sharing? See, this law was very simple. This law was saying, if you are an Indian and if you are doing research on any of the biodiversity, bioresource, do it. You are not required to inform. But if you are using a bioresource, straight away for commercial purposes, like you gave an example of that seaweed in South, or neem in, which we are exporting to Japan. Red sanders, we took a lot of money from red sanders. The red sanders that was seized by the customs, which was auctioned, NBA got a good amount of money, I think 5% of the money. So that was straight away commercialization of a bioresource of India. Now, Convention on Biological Diversity, it's for the information of the friends. In 1992, when this convention came and got signed and ratified, this convention allowed a particular sovereign country to have full control of its bioresources. Most of the bioresource has already gone overseas in the laboratory or national park in London. It's all there. It's all there. But the bioresource, so CBD gave all sovereign countries right to use or misuse its biodiversity. India is very proud. 2.5% of the world's area we have. We still house. We have 7 to 8% of the world's species. Your figures were slightly long. Right now we have, I think, about 100,000 plus animal species and around 45,000 plant species. Now, if you are straight away going for commercial utilization, it's 0.1, 2014 guidelines give you how much money you are supposed to pay to National Biodiversity Authority for conservation purposes, right? If you are doing research as an Indian, no issue. The issue came for the collaborative research, where you have a foreign partner and you are doing, because they are bringing technology, you are giving the bioresource. So there were some areas. So if those gray areas have to be addressed, amendments can come. The way the amendment is coming,
So
it's slightly,
why does this amendment bill come after the Divya Pharmacy Act? Wasn't it related to that act?
See, as I told you, did you see 2002, the act only, bare act came.
But the Divya Pharmacy case के बाद जब अगर amendment bill आ रहा है, so is it related to that or not?
No, see, there have been some gray areas. I'm not saying the gray, but the generic issues are If you are accessing a bioresource from the country, and if it is found in plenty, you will be charged, if there is no threat. Now, Texas Bacata, if you are making medicine out of that, it's a high altitude species. People who know botany would know. Now, Texas Bacata, if you are using for commercial purposes, as a National Biodiversity Authority or a State Biodiversity Board or Biodiversity Management Committee, I would like hefty amount of benefit sharing on that. But if you want to take away lantana, hypomia, invasive, take it for free. No issue. No issue.
Access and benefit sharing in case of Texas Bacata?
Access and benefit sharing, see in the context of conservation and sustainable use. Mind you, see, we should not de-link sustainable use for sustainable use. If I have only 1,000 Texas Bacata tree in this country, say, for example, then I should be very miser in providing access. And if I provide access, I should provide access at a cost. But if you want to take hypomia, if you want to take lantana away, I'll give it for free. I'll give it for free. So this is the context. See, don't isolate access only. Conservation and sustainable use has to be, access and benefit sharing has to be read with. Now tell me, we as Indian researcher or Indian scientists or Indian commercial user, how many species freely we are getting from China? After Nagoya Protocol, till there was Nagoya Protocol, it was very difficult to access, and benefit sharing mechanism was not there. India's law in 2002 provided it, but guidelines only came in 2014. So 12 years was in isolation. That's why these litigations came. That's why people went to the court. Even BMCs went against the State Biodiversity Board in the court. You read, there was a BMC in Madhya Pradesh. They went against the coal. We had really problem to telling them coal today is not biological resource. There's a definition of biological resource. See, the very simple. This is very, very. It's like golf. It is deceptively simple. The law is deceptively simple, but endlessly complicated. We have made. Why we have made complicated? Because the benefit sharing we don't want to do. Though Dr. Ramanathan is saying we'll give money. Give 0.1%, 0.2%. Texas Bacata 5%, red sanders 10%, because those are endangered.
You have to regulate. The NBA has to regulate. Has it regulated?
See, unfortunately, 20 staff you have given to NBA, right? And there are committees. See, our regulators, pardon my saying so, we work like jalebi. We make jalebis. Jalebi was good during the lunchtime. See, a regulator in this country has to give us laddus, quick decisions. If regulators decide quickly, if you take 12 years to make a guideline, then hell with the system, because it's not only biodiversity. You take any regulation for this, the way we make jalebis run around 25. He said 25 licenses. Mr. Ramanathan said 25 licenses we were taking earlier. This is not one more license. This is a license to conservation, license to sustainable use. See, benefit sharing is nominal, very nominal.
I want one clarification, sir. One clarification. Sir, my clarification. This is in health.
Now let's open the floor. Let's open the floor.
Yeah, plus to health purpose. Secondly, your 25D license is the Rest and Cosmetics Act. That act is given. That license is given only for Ayurveda doctors. I am an Ayurveda practitioner. Suppose I am not take the 25D license. I am free from the APS. Suppose I am prescribing, manufacturing the medicine for whom? To the health purpose of the other doctors. Then you asking the APS. Otherwise, you can charge it to myself also. Why you are both sides? One side
Dr. Ramanathan. There's a
no, this
gray
is in
area
health
there
purpose.
also.
No, that area they are purposely blank. This is in health purpose. Not as a
but if you're making
purpose.
it for a commercial purposes and you are sending it out of the country, so
no, that is only
that's
for
not
the prescription. Not only some 10% maybe. That is 90% we are manufacturing for the prescription, for Ayurvedic prescription.
Okay.
For the medicine.
Okay, I think I will open the floor for questions now. Does anyone have questions? Sukanya is going to come.
I would like to raise to a question citing an example of Assam tea. The Assam tea was patented in all the countries of the world. The reason was to protect its genetic identity, and because of so that no one can patent it or no can is this biodiversity now amendment or what you call as act protects such key, because all the other countries have their own laws and laws regarding their biodiversity, but India has been lagging in that sector. Can you highlight this issue?
Who are you asking the question to?
Anyone can speak on that.
Yes, I'd like to clarify what you're mentioning about Assam tea and Darjeeling tea, and it applies to Alfonso mangoes and also to Scotch whiskey from UK, is a very particular kind of intellectual property, which is called geographical indications, which is very, very different from a patent. It is about actually branding goods, agricultural goods, or arts and crafts, etc., that get their speciality because of being from a certain region, like basmati rice, which we argue, India and Pakistan are also on a diplomatic fight on that, on where is the original basmati come from. So that is about when you want to brand your particular images, your products, with a certain identity, that this is authentic if it is truly made in India, for instance, and therefore you stamp it with a geographical indication, which does not, which actually excludes the non-authentic makers of that from eating into your market. So you really have to understand that even when we are now entering into multilateral trade agreements outside of the WTO, and geographical indication is a concept that came from Europe, which has been inserted into the World Trade Organization to try and internationalize this particular kind of IPR. And now in free trade agreements, like we are trying to negotiate a bilateral trade and investment agreement with the European Union, one of the demands on IPR, they say, is for all our Parma ham from Italy, for our cheeses from France, for our champagne, you will grant geographical indications like we also grant. So you have a whole list of state-wise registration details of all the GI applications in India which are registered, to be able to give them a particular branding and image when they are sold outside of the country. But there are scholars who have researched that how much does it actually help the local communities who are, whether they're doing a particular pochampalli or sari or saving the ikat design, how much are they actually getting?
So there is an issue of access and benefit sharing there also.
May I clarify, because this is very important question this has been asked. She's also, the tea, Assam tea. Assam tea, yes, she also answering. I can, Assam tea or even the rice, we have around 100,000 varieties of rice in our country, almost one rice variety in 7 villages, that way. Now, rice, ITPG, FRA, this food and agriculture, FAOs, rice, these food security crops. If you are using rice as rice, fine. But if a particular variety of rice in our country, and Kerala people will vouch for it, Kerala and that area, some of those rice have real medicinal value, which is subject of research, and maybe tomorrow you get something out of it. So that is where, while accessing something, you just inform. But rice as rice, fine. Tea as tea, fine. You don't have to do any benefit sharing. Tea came from China, Camellia sinensis. It was planted in Assam. It was planted in Darjeeling, where I have served for 5 years. And in my native state in Uttarakhand also, it's in plenty now. Tea as tea is fine. But from Camellia sinensis, tomorrow if you extract or research or find out a drug which cures cancer or some disease which has not happened today, say COVID, in that event, if you have informed NBA or the Biodiversity Board, and in the event you make money 50 years from today, that 0.1% should flow back to the community who have been protecting it, preserving it. This is the essence of this law. This law is not that tea bushes tea. You have been making money out of tea for years together. No benefit sharing is required there. But if the tea bush gives you a medicine tomorrow, then that is where the access
Okay, you
and
gave the
information.
example of rice.
Yeah.
So Dr. Ramanathan might say Navara rice is a medicinal rice.
Yes.
So what will you do with that?
No, it's already known thing is fine. But if something new comes out, a specific drug which gives you a good amount of money to your shareholders in the market, we as stakeholders, why shouldn't we get it? 0.1%. This is the law is that's why it's a radical law. Unfortunately, it has not been taken in that spirit of conservation and sustainable use.
Dr.
See,
Ramanathan,
otherwise this particular variety of rice, Nimrana rice, will go away from the earth. Then what happens? That is where sustainable use comes.
But it's cultivated. That
We
is not
don't want
cultivated.
see one. Ayush doesn't want to understand MOEF doesn't want to understand ITP, agriculture. This is the problem in our country and everywhere.
Last question, not last question. Sorry, everyone is going to
Yes,
get
No,
a
have you
Chairman,
understood what I'm trying to say?
Yes,
If
sir.
I can make you
Yeah, yeah.
understand that, things become easy. If I don't want to, I can't make you understand that, it's very difficult, very complicated.
Okay, so
And that's
Dr.
why I
Thank
said
you,
abandon the law.
Chairman.
Dr.
Thank you,
Ramanathan
Chairman.
will
Agreed my point because you have mentioned that Navara is a traditional knowledge from the Ayurvedic text. Suppose any new varieties you want asked into the APS, we are ready for that. That is my question. That is Acharya's concept. We want to say APS. That is your this health purpose. This Acharya, Charaka, Shushruta, Vakpada, they have developed their knowledge. That area you want APS. That
So
is
is anyone
against for
giving-
Indian philosophy.
Is
That is our request. You agree on point. Suppose Navara rice is a new variety. Definitely need a APS. That Navara is mentioned in the Ayurvedic text. No need. This is our system. Our own trust book, what they
Okay.
mentioned. You don't go to the
Okay.
APS.
So any more questions? Question.
So what do you conclude? What do you conclude?
अभी तो खत्म नहीं हुआ.
अच्छा, नहीं. No. This is the issue, key issue. Same plant can give you no value. Same gene can give you lots of value in future. We are just are asking you to inform us.
पिछले साल में, why didn't
See the industry doesn't want to inform even.
Okay, let's have the next question.
Unfortunately.
Let's have.
I'm Chaitrali Chandorkar. I'm from Pune. I work from Maharashtra Times. I have basic question. Previous speaker, they have already mentioned, you all have given references of PIB, PBI and Biodiversity Committee. But currently, if you look at overall scenarios, still 10 years we are fighting to establish committee, Biodiversity Committee. And overall situation of PIB, which you all are referring, it's very poor. They are not at all authentic. It's just they are making a list of it. So on what basis you are going to, what will be the base of it? Second, what will be the accountability? Who will, because all the points, all the medicines you are talking about, they all are in reserve forest area. So what will be the role of forest? एंड उसको कैसे कंट्रोल करने वाले हैं, क्योंकि फॉरेस्ट वाले ऐसे भी उनका ध्यान नहीं रहता क्या चल रहा है फॉरेस्ट में. और अगर आप उनको परमिशन देते हैं कि ऐसे कितना जो कुछ आपकी डिमांड है और व्हाट विल बी द अवेलेबल रिसोर्सेज, सो ये पूरा चेकलिस्ट को लेके आप जस्ट एलैबोरेट करना.
Who would you ask? Like anyone want to answer?
Couple of questions together.
Why don't you ask Putani if she would like to answer?
Shalini, would you like to answer this?
I think there are multiple questions there. One is, how do you regulate the extent of the access to be able to make it sustainable from the point of view of conservation? The other question, which I understood she asked, was what happens to the people's biodiversity registers, since they're doing a listing. And in fact, some of the communities are also smart that they don't give all the details in the people's biodiversity registers. So what is the value of doing this local level documentation if that does not kind of bring onto the record knowledge systems or a listing or chronicling of resources that are locally available? And can these people's biodiversity registers be actually used to negotiate, like Section 41, the existing Section 41(3) says that local communities, people's biodiversity registers, because they make known that there is resources and knowledge that's available for access, then BMCs should be empowered to be able to get access and negotiate the terms even at that point before the State Biodiversity Board or the National Biodiversity Authority comes into being. But yes, there's always a concern about under which land, whether that's forested land and whether you have to take permissions from the forest department for even bioprospecting. And in fact, there have been the early generation of cases was that bioprospectors, particularly from outside, were booked both under the forest and wildlife legislation as well as the Biodiversity Act for taking access without due approvals from either the NBA or the SBB. The idea is that there has to be a mechanism to be able to track, because you cannot effect access and benefit sharing if you don't know who is accessing how much from where. And that then also becomes a means to try and join the dots that this local resource and knowledge can be traced back to a particular biodiversity management committee and the resources under its jurisdiction. So ABS ought to become a mechanism for poverty reduction, that you're generating funds and to capacitate, and there is an issue about being able to capacitate the state biodiversity boards and the biodiversity management committees so that they can also generate funds, the kind of incentives that even the chairperson was talking about in the previous session, was how do you incentivize communities that they have a stake in conservation, because tomorrow they will charge either the economic value of that resource or get non-monetary benefits from that if those are conserved and if those are shared. So creating a stake is something really important. And I think that's a larger issue, not only simply providing resources for setting up these committees, these boards and authorities, but the political will to be able to non-centralize this entire biodiversity governance, which is a long-standing enterprise of effecting decentralization. And this goes even beyond the Biodiversity Act, even like, for instance, the PISA or the village councils and tribal groups were saying that we are in any case de facto managers of the local bioresources. But how can we actually benefit from them, so that acknowledgement can come in three ways: that you acknowledge that it's from us, that we are the origin, that due permission is taken. So that's part of effecting biodiversity justice, that आप मेरा चीज इस्तेमाल, मेरा ज्ञान और मेरी जैव विविधता और जैव संसाधन जो मेरे क्षेत्र में है उसका अगर इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं तो पहले मुझसे पूछ तो लीजिए. That's why that is what Nagoya Protocol is all about: full, free, prior informed consent of communities. And then finally, and that is a debate internationally as well, what is the trigger for benefit sharing? Is it merely the access, or is it commercial utilization from that access? Once you've accessed the material, developed a product, placed it in the market, at that point do you pay? And I think the India experience is very valuable.
Basically, these are the things that should have come in the amendment bill, which are not there in that. So, is there another question?
No, this I need to supplement her.
Okay.
I need to supplement her, and for a very good question again. See, this PBR, BMC, PBR in particular is a dynamic process. It's not end. And it's for the bio literacy, it's involving community. What is happening? Some experts are going making, students are going making the PBRs, and I don't know where those. This is a movement, bio diversity.
So was NBA supposed
Yeah.
to
Now, see, for income tax, GST, you have huge departments. Now, 43, Section 43C mentioned. I was also about to mention. Now, who will do this collection of? See, no BMC. At least till 16, when I was chairperson of the National Biodiversity Authority, barring one BMC, no BMC had collected even one farthing from anybody. Though it gives clear power to a BMC to regulate. As I said, lantana you take for free. But if you are taking away Texas Bacata, I will charge you hefty money.
So
Right?
NBA was not able to actually educate
No,
people.
unfortunately, there is no mechanism.
There was
You
no
want
manpower.
Panchayat's three-tier system, decentralized system without any knowledge. See, either we should organize the BMC, PBR is also being made by somebody else. Right now, the amendment is excluding the codified knowledge, which Mr. Ramanathan is, appreciating. So this will take away the whole thing away. Better to close that. My point is, PBR making is a continuous process. People should get involved, should see the bright side of the law. It's a very, very important law for the country, for the conservation, as I keep on saying. Access and benefit sharing is a very small part. It's basically to strengthen conservation. Conservation otherwise remains a talk shop. And sustainable use, we don't know what is the limit. Do we know how many neem trees are in our country? What is the annual production of neem leaves? We don't know. And how much is used? What should be the particularly those species. And I think there was a discussion when Sunita was also here in the previous JSI thing, how many species are there. 80% of the species are insects. And I don't know how many of you know people roam around in Northeast and Darjeeling. We have caught so many times in Kerala. They take insects in the matchboxes away. 80% of the species, I think around 1.7 million species have been named. 10% of that is in India, both animal plants made. Estimates are 100 million to 1,000 millions. The loss of species because of humans has gone down 1,000 times than the natural loss. Species keep on evolving, keep on adapting. 4 billion species were there once upon a time. In 1 million year, 10% go away. In 10 million year, 20% go away. This is all proven. So this happens. This keeps.
Okay, let's have the next question.
But maybe there could have been a drug for COVID-19. Or if, those kind of things, all zoonotic diseases. So nature has solution to that. Let's protect nature. That's why I said nature protects if she is protected.
Okay.
But we don't want to protect it. We just want to take away everything by way of access, no benefit sharing. Benefit sharing can be 0 rupee, no issue. But please inform. That's the law. This is the law. That's it.
But you wanted benefit sharing earlier.
Yeah, I said Lantana, I'll give you free.
Okay.
Texas Bacata, I'll charge you hefty. Red Sanders, I'll charge you hefty. Nimrana rice, I'll charge you hefty.
Okay.
If you find a drug out of that. Rice, eat as rice, no problem. Our Ayurveda system gives you Urani, Siddha, all these systems give you so many uses, but logic and the efficacy, the modern medicine, the way they say, it's not there. But we are using it, we are treating it. Unfortunately, life expectancy has still gone up 30 years to 50 years to 70 years. So there's all debate.
Last question.
I think it's important. It's important to say that biodiversity cannot be considered in isolation of the humans that manage those production systems, that are the knowledge holders, because conservation either in situ or ex situ. If it is ex situ, it is put away in a cold storage, in a gene bank, or in like a global seed vault. That has no value if it is not being actively grown, so that it's adapting and being resilient for our agri-food systems. Also, you cannot have it's of no use if a local resource is just documented and you don't know what its uses are. And those uses come from the uncodified, informal systems of knowledge, which is when farmers, livestock keepers, forest dwellers, fish farmers, women, seed keepers, and knowledge holders are interacting every day with that resource, and therefore are both custodians and stewards. And therefore they have the leads on the uses of those genetic resources, whether it's plant, animal, fish, etc. And so we can't talk about conservation in isolation of the very humans that manage the production systems, and also not only are producing and cultivating, but even wild foods and wild plants, which the industry wants to access, contribute a lot to the food and health and nutritional security. So your question, Vibha, originally was about, whether we want to use or whether you want to put it, keep it in the wild. The wild, even that categorization, I think, is false, because the wild and the cultivated and domesticated are constantly interacting. You have wild bee species who are still doing your pollination services. You have crop wild relatives out there, whether they're in protected areas or outside of protected areas, which are the source of heritable traits that are being used in crop breeding. So your use and your wild go hand in hand. Unfortunately, we're only concentrating on the cultivated ones, but not the genetic stock out there in the wild.
What you are saying is that we don't understand the biodiversity we have, even after so many years of
Yes.
use. We don't understand.
No, we understand fully, madam.
Every day.
We understand. We know practical APS.
Okay, the Ayurveda one.
We know that.
Vivaji,
But only problem we are facing the rules and regulation is not possible to implement the Ayurvedic industry. That area you consider. You know what is the sand? River sand, the cost of the present day, 12,000 rupees. Olden days only 1,000 rupees. Why? Unnecessary the rules and regulation. We are request only 588 species to exempt it. That is only humble request. We are ready for the APS. We are supporting the APS, not against for that. Please understand. We are no the APS. We need the people to the India.
Okay, so your industry needs it. That's a good thing.
I would say duty.
Okay, so I would say most of the biodiversity which has survived, these 600 plants have been there conserved because the Ayurvedic industry needed it. They made some effort. Earlier, there was nothing called access and benefit sharing, but there must have been some kind of a system in which a Vaid would have actually ensured that his access to the plant is there. I would suppose that way it can work. So let's have the next question.
Yeah, my question is actually related. My question is actually related to what he said just now.
Yeah.
That he says that the Ayurveda textbooks have got mentioned so many species, and we already are having codified medicinal solutions in all those things. So since it's used for medicine, you should not be taxed. That is my understanding of what his argument was. Sir Pandey sir, I wanted to ask you is, now you mentioned about that example of Nyavara rice itself. So when you actually, as a rice, if you're consuming it, you don't have an issue.
Yeah.
Now tomorrow somebody makes a medicine with this Nyavara contents and whatever, and they say that it is mentioned in the Ashtanga Hridayam of chapter so and so of this textbook. If they say, and half of these Sanskrit books are not codified at all, nobody knows what is there in it. So where do you, no, it's not, traditional knowledge has not been completely interrupted into a common language. It is still an exclusive zone of the Sanskrit literary people. So how do you actually classify that into, sir? What does it come in? Will it come into this thing or not?
Good. I thought it's closing. So Vivaji, in fact, I was just trying to answer in one question your topic of the session: use or keep in wild. So I am for use with some riders. Now, coming back to your question, the famous turmeric case, or, all that. See, when you go out and out, see, our Ayurvedic system, the codified knowledge that we have, most of the codified knowledge is there. And the PBR exercise was to dig, which is still not codified. Otherwise our codified ancient systems are there. But modern medicine, modern system, FDSA, they do not recognize your, you say we get healed. We used to, but let's be practical in a commercial world. Let's be very open to, I must get a license that yes, this particular property of my particular bioresource heals that, and that has to be time tested. Vaccination for COVID, we could do it fast. If you read my paper on genetic GEAC, that genetically modified crop, I'll share my paper with you. We could do this. Otherwise, a GM crop takes 10 years of the field exercise, and then they go ahead. Now, Ayurvedic medicine, you say yes, and you believe, and you use. No harm. But if some in the patent system, IPR, WIPO came in 1994, CVD came in 92, whole world, everything got commercialized. Now, if you are into commercial line, if you are making hefty money, please give us a little bit, because I say 300 million people in our country are real biodiversity champions who still, live in at a level, and thanks to them, not the Ayurvedic industry that has saved. I see 20 crops in the world only give you food. 20 crops. So why do we need 1 million? Right? So industry, Ayurvedic, they wanted cultivation should be, the cultivation. I think NBA was working during my time itself. We were working. If we can allow them areas to cultivate a known species, non aloe vera, whatever, it's known. See, our thing is tomorrow, if you get something from some bioresource and you take away the whole thing, the species vanishes from the earth. See, climate change is reversible, but biodiversity loss is irreversible. A species gone today is gone forever. We might have lost many species which could have cured our modern diseases, but so this law is to ensure that species remains. That's why I'm time and again giving you an example of Texas buckheart.
Okay, let's have
but there are many species, amphibians, insects, viruses, bacteria, there are plenty, laboratory. Yeah.
I just had a very simple,
I will now stop. Yeah.
simple question for Dr. Ramanathan.
Yes, I have 3 questions.
Dr. Ramanathan, I know that you're...
But we started late, mind you. It is very interesting.
Hearing.
You have to factor in that.
My question is for Dr. Ramanathan. I know that your biggest anxiety is classifying the Ayurveda industry as commercial. You don't agree with that. But can you also tell us a little bit, can you summarize your views of the amendment that has been brought in? If you can just summarize, what your thoughts are and what your views are of the amendments that are now being debated.
Thank you, Simran. I would have asked that as the last question. I hope the rest of the questions are like that also. Now, please answer, Dr. Ramanathan. We will get back. No,
Yes. Madam, you tell me this is not agree the commercialization. Okay. Why the Ayurveda physician and Hakims are exempted? Because their job is only the prescription. They are on manufacturing and the prescription to the patient. What is my job? Suppose I am the same way for the help of the human being and other Vaidyas. I am prescribing the medicine, manufacturing the medicine as per the 25D license, only for the Ayurveda doctors, not for the industry. Without an Ayurveda doctors, nobody manufacturing Ayurvedic drug. One side you are exempted, one side you are on the APS. We are not against for the APS. We are ready for the APS. For where? For the traditional knowledge for whom? Any carnage, any type. That area we are ready to pay the.
So the new biodiversity amendments, do you see any problems in that which would make it difficult for you to access or the herbs?
100%, it is not at all practical. It is a police raj or too much of the problems of industry. We don't know where is you are collecting the area. Everything is an endpoint. You are asking the APS for where our own turnover, not for the before the APS. Suppose our industry is on loss, we are ready what to the APS. You are not asking the profit. Where are you asking? Total amount of our turnover. So how to workable? Is it possible? It is not at all practical for the Ayurveda industry. That is I am in Kerala. 60% or 40% are collecting for the North India. We don't know where the source. The source I want to correct in the area. All the area we want to hand over to the department.
So
how is it possible?
What
All
you
the
are
areas
saying,
not at all practical.
So what you're saying is the Biodiversity Act, the problems that it had, still exist with the amendments also. It's not going to help the industry.
Yes.
Not helpful.
Okay, fine. I hope that answers your question. Now, Jayanto, where did she go? with the
It's been pointed out that Biodiversity Act is so important. It's quite ironical that being so important, it is one of the poorest implemented act in the country. It's such ironical. I think we have been all fighting, all of you fighting for the last 1 hour. I've been writing a different copy, but also hearing that. But it was such a contradiction that you have been saying that it's such an important act and the implementation is so poor. That's also you are kind of accepting. Having said that, the BMC recently with this NGT pushing up, all these urban local bodies are being forced to do the BMC. Whatever they are being taking people from outside and creating the BMC. But the point is, the BMC, in charge of the BMC, there are officials from the municipalities. Or in Panchayat, the Panchayat Pradhans. The people who are destroying biodiversity, you are asking them to protect the biodiversity. So it is fundamentally flawed. How can you save the biodiversity in the country? I really don't know.
There are not enough people in the
I have understood your. Should I answer?
Yes.
See, let's forget biodiversity for the time being. We have you just take a generic view of law, policy, regulation, and implement. Just forget about this. GST, income tax. You are never happy paying income tax. Unfortunately, nature, which provides us life, here we are getting so, making it complicated. Now, forget about urban area, just the forest, the reserve forest area, even BMCs have no access there, though it should be. A. B. Live example, Uttarakhand has Ban Panchayats, all run by, not public, by the forest officials. Forest official, I was also in the forest service over here before joining IAS. Forest official, the mandate is, and I think the mandate is no. That's why I said use the biodiversity. When you use karoge, tabhi to aap aur badhega wo. But the species which we are losing fast or which are getting exploited commercially hugely, you have to incentivize those who are now plantations in an urban area. I don't see whosoever runs it. What value you will get from that? Neem leaves, we also want to be used for composting those the leaves which fall. In fact, Sri Lanka once, to drive away invasive alien species, they told the school children, bring that plant, and by that exercise, they could remove that plant from that island, Sri Lanka. So there are umpteen examples of this. Point is, why in this particular law only, there are so many there were no complications. As I said, 12 years, it took us to get the guidelines. And virtually, these are all paper tigers. PBRs are, I don't know where, I don't think it's the basic idea behind PBR was the biodiversity movement, right? And it can't be same across the country. It can't be same across the country because large, vast agricultural fields are there. That's where the agricultural biodiversity came. Plant Varieties Protection Act, PVRA, that, it's a tongue twister. There are many things. Okay. So all laws have straitjacket implementation and horizontal. So see, I began at that time I was not speaking. I said, I said this law should not have come in 2002. But after having done it, we should have implemented it by support. It's a multidisciplinary. Biodiversity mainstreaming is a huge challenge. By the time we mainstream, we will lose all the species on this earth. The life will be gone. Okay. So that is where it's very important to appreciate this law. Should not have come. I agree with you. If you are not able to implement, why do you bring it? I am with you. It should not have come in 2000.
Okay. Sunil ji,
I am Sunil Kumar, a journalist from Chhattisgarh. This whole discussion of last 1 hour, it reminded me of my father, who was an Ayurvedic practitioner for 62 long years till his death. And one philosophy which he had been sharing with me, I never took that very seriously, was that whenever he was required some parts of trees or shrubs or some other biomaterial from jungles to make Ayurvedic medicines, he would go to jungle, he would stand in front of the tree. He would fold his hand, pray to the tree, ask for the permission, would explain reason that why he would need leaves, fruit, or trunk, part of trunk or roots of the tree to make medicines to treat patients. He would wait. And at times he felt that the tree had given him permission. And then only he used to take those parts back home and make medicines. I never took it very seriously, but now this whole discussion, it reminds me that the whole Biodiversity Act, which wasn't enforced in his lifetime, but it is based on the same philosophy. If you are taking a part of biodiversity, bioproperty from somewhere, some area, you just inform people, you request people, you say to them in terms of a prayer or in terms of your faith, respect. That is all Shalini and Pandeji, they had been describing it all along. So I had been witnessing it since my childhood, and that is only formulated as an act now, unfortunately not in force for most of the people. Fortunately for some of the people that it is not in force. But I only wanted, this is not a question, I only wanted to narrate this personal experience of mine.
This is a very good end for the whole conversation.
Answer. Your answer is question. Your father
Shalini,
never
would you like
needed
to
a permission
the session
as
with
long
your
as
view?
he was using it for livelihood.
Just after that.
Section 7 clearly gives you that power. So see,
Okay.
unfortunately, as I said, the law, see, we are not aware. Nobody tells you, nobody empowers. Your father was.
Unfortunately, that philosophy is not included
It's free.
in the
That
Biodiversity Act.
those who are making
This
money.
is our problem. The you have mentioned that very clear. That knowledge, that our philosophy respect, not at all include this rule, regulation. You go cycling, everything fine, harassment. They want only money. Sorry for that. They want only money, not the protection of the ABS.
Okay, so you feel that it
This
is
is
all only a
unbelievable.
money-making
So that
process?
is, you want to save Ayurveda, genuine Ayurveda. Please think it. We don't bother about that. Ayurveda is collapsed, nothing to happen.
Okay.
It is our own
Dr.
philosophy.
Ramanathan, Dr. Ramanathan, Shalini, please.
Don't say we are not against for the APL. We are ready for the APL. Don't say. That is where feel very bad. That is where feel very bad. We are ready for the APL.
Okay, fine. Shalini, please. Shalini.
Yes, I think the Biodiversity Act is about both conservation and communities. And you can't do one without the other. And I think that's the whole issue of biojustice, is that you recognize both the communities and the knowledge holders and recompense them with the due respect that, yes, you have been the conservers so far, the biodiversity managers on the ground. And therefore, because now the industry is accessing it, does not mean that they can free ride on your knowledge and your conservation work that has happened in all these thousands of years. I mean, look at the history of agriculture itself, more than 10,000 years. And the seed industry, just a couple of, say, 40, 50 years. So, and the concern with these amendments is that you cannot start creating carve-outs to the access and benefit sharing system. Already there is enough scope with the normally traded commodities after Section 40, where several commodities which are normally traded are exempt from any ABS obligation. And so that itself would suffice for the functioning of the Ayush industry. They're continuing to make profit. They're not running in a loss. Also, the whole idea of your discussion was hinged on the idea of use versus wild. And I think that false differentiation needs to be removed. Use not only means including the various practical activities involved in cultivating and raising domestic species. It's the implementation of formal and informal genetic improvement and domestic additional wild species, but also the management of wild species themselves and their habitats in and around production systems. Your production systems will also get resilience if we are to have resilience for the challenges of tomorrow, whether it's the biodiversity crisis or the climate crisis, you have to have resilient agri-food systems. And for that, both use and wild have to go together.
Okay, Shalini, let's end the thing. I would like to thank all the panelists. It was a very, very good discussion. Thank you. Dr. Ramanathan, thank you for putting your point across. Shalini, that it was good. And Dr. Pandey, thank you. We will end the
I hope I didn't.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All the support. Thank you.
Thank you.